The New York Jets are in dire need of a franchise quarterback, and their search for one this offseason has a chance to get real interesting. Welcome to the channel. If you are new here, consider subscribing and dropping a like on the video if you do enjoy it. We're on the road to 5,000 subscribers, so if you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that button. But things have been quite a disaster for the Jets since their back-to-back AFC Championship appearances back in 2009 through 2010. But contrary to popular belief, the early 2000s for the Jets was actually pretty successful, as the team made the playoffs 6 out of the 10 years in that decade and looked to be on track to winning their second Super Bowl in franchise history. Especially from what we've seen from the Jets in the 2010s and now the early 2020s, no season has been easy for this team to consistently put together winning seasons and make the playoffs. So I do want to give their franchise a little bit of credit for what they were able to do in the early 2000s when they did have that type of success. But even in the midst in their pretty good stretch of seasons, the biggest problem for the Jets' franchise since quarterback Joe Namath retired was still pretty prevalent and a problem over a decade ago. The reason the Jets were so effective in the late 2000s was not due to a high-powered offense and a great stud quarterback. It was due to the superb performance of their defense, along with a defensive mastermind in Rex Ryan, who the team hired in 2009. But after Brett Favre retired and a new regime for the Jets came into play, that's really where the quarterback dysfunction started to take place, and we've seen how it's all played out and led to where we are today. But going back to 2009 for a minute and Rex Ryan leading the helm, the Jets took their first participant with this quarterback nightmare in Mark Sanchez out of USC with the number 5 overall pick in the NFL draft. As a junior for the Trojans, Mark Sanchez put together a fantastic season with 3,200 yards, 34 touchdowns to only 10 interceptions in 2008. And the Jets brought Sanchez into a pretty good situation with a solid defense and a pretty nice running game, hoping he could be the team's franchise quarterback for the first time in over 30 years. In the first couple of years of his career, he was okay. The Jets didn't really ask him to do too much. He was able to rely on a great defense with the likes of Darrelle Revis and a good rushing attack with Thomas Jones and even LaDainian Tomlinson in his second year. And he did just enough to get the Jets within one game of the Super Bowl for back-to-back years, so the Jets were pretty happy with where Sanchez was leading into his third season in the NFL. But as the key players on this Jets team got older and some of them left in free agency, year 3 became increasingly important for Sanchez because he would actually have to win games for the Jets with his arm and not be able to rely so heavily on the defense and the running game. But after an 8-8 year and a season in which Mark Sanchez seemed to regress, it became clear that it was the beginning of the end for his tenure in New York. Now, where am I going with this, talking about Mark Sanchez and the older Jets? Well, I think the old Jets situation is weirdly similar to how the Jets team was this past year in 2022. A star-studded defense which became one of the best in the entire NFL, a good defensive head coach in Robert Saleh similar to Rex Ryan, some pretty electric offensive weapons, but a massive hole at the quarterback position. And now the question is, what will the Jets do to address this issue? Are they going to make the same mistakes they did in the 2010s, or will they finally learn? Now let's go back and see what the Jets did after Sanchez and compare it to what the Jets are doing now and see if there's any similarities between the two. After Sanchez was gone, the Jets made a pretty interesting selection in the 2013 NFL draft when they invested in another young quarterback, Geno Smith out of West Virginia, in the second round. Geno started right away for the Jets but never really amounted to anything and ended up leaving the team after 4 years and became a backup for multiple seasons until finally putting together a pretty awesome season with the Seahawks this past year with 30 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. Really, up until this year, Geno was seen as a huge bust and he was just going to be a career backup for a multitude of teams, but he got his chance with the Seahawks this past year and absolutely shocked everybody and was one of the best stories in the entire league this year. But just imagine if Geno did put together those numbers while he was on the Jets. I think we would be having an entirely different conversation about the quarterback situation. But after Geno and a couple of misses at the young quarterback route with now Sanchez and Geno Smith not working out for the team, the Jets decided to switch things up and go the veteran quarterback route, signing Ryan Fitzpatrick from 2015 to 2016, and then they brought in Josh McCown basically for their tank season in 2017, which obviously when they were signed, nobody really believed that they were going to be the long-term option at the quarterback position for the team. And that's when the Jets would take their second quarterback bust out of USC and Sam Darnold with the 3rd overall pick in the 2018 NFL draft. Darnold really didn't have a season that stuck out in terms of success in his tenure with the Jets, and it felt like he didn't really belong from the start, and that never really changed with the team. I don't want to put all the blame on Sam Darnold because I'm sure having the supporting cast past that he had to start his career, and also Todd Bowles and Adam Gase as his head coaches did not help. But regardless, the Jets would trade away Darnold after his third season for 3 draft picks to the Carolina Panthers, including a second rounder after going 2-14 and securing the second overall pick in the 2021 NFL Draft. But with another young quarterback on the horizon, the Jets would basically blow up their entire team, firing Adam Gase and bring in an entirely new coaching staff. The Jets would end up hiring Robert Saleh from the San Francisco 49ers, who was seen at the time as one of the best defensive minds in football. But as we've seen time and time again across the NFL, but including the Jets from this past decade, nothing really matters until you get the quarterback position right, and with their third top 5 pick at a quarterback in 12 years, the Jets would go 3 for 3 with drafting a bust when they took Zach Wilson out of BYU. In my opinion, I think Zach Wilson was pretty similar to Sam Darnold, as they both just looked out of place from the start. I do think Wilson was worse than Darnold because I don't even think he had a good stretch of games for like 1.5 years where he did start for the team. I think if you go back to the Darnold's Jets years, I think there were some times where Darnold showed some promise and maybe you could cling on some hope for a stretch of games or maybe a half a season. And we really never saw that for Zach Wilson. I really can't think of a stretch where he had multiple games where he looked like a young, elite, promising quarterback. And the fact of the matter is, Wilson came into a way better situation than Darnold did in his first 2 seasons. And with the fans and the organization starving for a franchise quarterback and seeing Darnold not work out just a few years prior, his leash was a lot shorter, and after throwing 4 touchdowns to 5 interceptions in 7 starts of this past season, Wilson was benched and it looked like his era with the Jets was practically over. The offense looked significantly better with Mike White under center. I'm not going to call Mike White a good quarterback or how the Jets offense was suddenly dynamic and one of the top in the league, but they definitely moved the ball more, they sustained drives more often, and their offense was just noticeably better. But unfortunately, Mike White ended up getting hurt. He broke multiple ribs against the Buffalo Bills, giving the starting job right back to Zach Wilson. And this really felt like the last real opportunity for Zach Wilson to revive his career with the Jets before they went in a different direction. And after a pretty mediocre game against the Lions, Wilson would have a quick turnaround on Thursday Night Football against the Jacksonville Jaguars, which turned out to be one of the worst quarterback games I've ever watched. Wilson was 9 of 18 for 92 yards and a pick with 3 offensive points in the first half at home, and ended up being benched for former CFL quarterback Chris Streveler on national television, and that was basically the end of Zach Wilson. And after that night, Zach Wilson has not been on the field since, and there's a ton of speculation on what the Jets are going to do for their quarterback position this offseason. In a new report from ESPN reporter Albert Breer, he said it seems clear that Rodgers, under the right circumstances, would be their first choice, but this isn't an Aaron or bust situation. They're exploring everything from Rodgers and Carr to Ryan Tannehill and Jimmy Garoppolo to even the idea of bringing Geno Smith back or luring Daniel Jones from across town. Part of it, as I see it, lies in how the quarterback market shakes out. So it seems as if the Jets may end up being the biggest domino to fall this offseason as far as the quarterback carousel goes, and it's pretty obvious to everybody that the 4-time NFL MVP Aaron Rodgers would be atop their list. But unlike what they've done as an organization in the past, they're really trying to do their homework on all of these guys before making the best decision for their team. They met with Derek Carr in New York just a few weeks ago. They met with him again this week at the NFL Combine, and I'm sure when free agency officially begins, Jimmy G and Geno Smith may come in for a visit as well if they're available. But personally, I think the Jets will end up with either Derek Carr or Jimmy G. Now, I started recording this video a few days ago, but a huge bombshell just dropped while I was finishing up the editing of this video. Derek Carr is headed to the New Orleans Saints. The two sides are meeting and finalizing a deal today, which means he's officially out of the running to be the Jets starting quarterback next year. I'm honestly a little bit shocked about this right now because I did think Derek Carr was actually going to head to the Jets. Heard everything that Robert Saleh was saying at the NFL Combine, how much he was hyping up Derek Carr and how good of a player he was. And they also met with each other 2 times. I thought everything was trending towards a direction of Derek Carr heading to the Jets, but it turns out that the Saints were the favorite all along, and that's where he's going to be playing next year. So now things get even more interesting with the Jets and what they're going to do, because I feel like their backup plan, if they did not get Rodgers, is completely gone now. So with this happening, I feel like the Jets have less leverage to get Aaron Rodgers away from the Packers, because the Packers are looking at it like, hey, your backup option is now gone. It's either Rodgers or pretty much bust for you. We're going to make you overpay to get Rodgers on your team. Does that potentially drive up the trade value for Rodgers going to the Jets? I guess we'll have to see how that all plays out. But wow, this changes a lot for the Jets. I'm really curious to see how they play their hand now. I guess that potentially means Jimmy G becomes their backup option, which I still think is a pretty solid option at the quarterback position. Definitely better than what they've had in the past couple of years. but I think we might see desperation mode for the Jets start to kick in as we are 1 week away from free agency. But thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and drop a like on the video if you did enjoy it. And now with this latest news, my quarterback prediction for the Jets next year is wrong, but let me know your updated prediction on who you think will be the starting quarterback for the Jets next season. But anyway, thank you so much for watching the video, and I will catch you guys in the next one.